down here. Amen. You are not defined by the chains, but by the cross. You are not defined by the bondage, but by the blood. That's who you are. And tonight we're going to be discussing our identity. Identity theft. Can the devil change who you are? The Bible says no. We're going to talk about it briefly this evening. First John chapter 3 verses 1 and 2. Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons and daughters, hoping you don't mind if I say daughters too, of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. I like this one. Beloved, now are we the sons and daughters of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Amen. Sing with me, church. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving I'll be a living sanctuary, Lord, for you, Lord, for you. Here are the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Our Father in heaven, as we investigate who we really are and how powerless Satan is to do anything about it, and all that you have done for us and what our destiny is, I pray that you would first hide Ryan. No one wants to see that guy, Lord. But that you yourself would come and speak to us, and that you would touch each and every heart, particularly those that are in the valley of decision, and let these words have power, and let them have might. I pray these things in thy holy name. Amen. I also forgot Brother Joel here. Also one of the ones helping me stand on prayer. He just walked in. Some time ago, a relative of mine was enjoying a lovely Sabbath afternoon. This is a Saturday afternoon, for those who don't know, with his family. And he had friends and he had church members, and they were all over there having casserole. Had some great casserole today, I did. Those sisters were all right. He was enjoying juice and talking about the week with his family when suddenly the door burst open. And 4 police officers came running in to the house. Whereupon, in front of the entire family and the church members, can't forget the church members, they grabbed this man and threw him on the ground, put him in handcuffs, read him his rights, and tossed him in the car and took him off to book him. Why? Fraud, writing bad checks, racketeering, you name it. This church brother. But what had happened is that apparently through some transaction on the internet, somebody else had gotten a hold of his social security number. and with that number proceeded to mess this man's identity all up. And with the messed up identity, the police came along and grabbed the wrong man and accused him based upon a false identity. Identity theft is a serious thing in the United States, and in fact, just recently, President Obama has announced an initiative to help curb the prevalence of identity theft, because if you cannot say you are who you are, there can be some very serious consequences. Identity theft. I don't know if anybody knows who this man was. This is Joseph Goebbels, or Joseph Goebbels, and he was the head of the ministry. I'm going to read it here, that I'll say it my way. He was the head of the Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. This guy was in charge of all of the propaganda for the Nazis. Now, everybody knows how the Nazis felt about the Jews. They didn't like them very much, to put it extremely mildly. And everybody knows what eventually happened to the Jewish community there. Decimated. Now, that's not even the right term, because decimation means 1 in 10. 6 million Jews. And some argue yea and some argue nay, but there are mass graves over there right now with a number on it to prove what the Jews went through during World War II. But understand, when it first began, you couldn't just go marching down the street and grabbing Jews and killing them and throwing them in prison. You couldn't just go burning down all of their stores. You couldn't do that, because the Jews were prominent members of the community. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were teachers, they were advisors. They had an extremely impressive identity. So what they had to do first was change that. And I have been fascinated at how they were able to get an entire country of sane people to do the things and perform the atrocities that were done and performed in the Second World War against the Jews and other groups. What happened? How'd you get all these people to agree to do it? Were there not Germans that were against the persecution of the Jews? And the answer is yes. Many of them. At first, most of them. Maybe all of them. But they began a propaganda campaign. And I have some copies of this propaganda, and it's not terrible, but I did not think, because of the ethnic bias, I didn't think it was appropriate to show here in the church. But they passed out these leaflets that began to stereotype the Jews. They just began by attacking the identity of the Jews. This is who they are, and this is what they look like. You have problems? Blame these people. And then they began to take away the names and give them numbers, and take away the various clothing and cultural items and give them uniforms. Essentially, they effectively eroded the identity of the Jews in the community. And the Jews remembered who they were. But when in the presence of everybody else they had lost their identity, it became easier to persecute the people because of identity theft. Knowing who you are is a serious thing. And Satan has been using this technique to deceive people and to assault the children of God since the very, very beginning. Now, even now, as we struggle with our various things, as we struggle with our temptations, as we struggle with our sins, as we struggle to get from here to here, the devil is constantly assaulting our identity, trying to get me and you to forget who we are so that we'll never get from under the chains. Because if you don't know who you are, you'll do anything. You are vulnerable. Let's look at some scripture. Let's look at the beginning. Genesis, the first chapter, verses 26 and 27. Here we are at the start of the world. God has just completed a masterpiece. The earth is green and it is blue, and large flocks of birds fly in the air, and massive schools and universities of fish swim the oceans. And God looks at his work and he says, that's good. And then God says, let us make man in what, everybody? In our image. This is God talking about man and woman. He said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. And let them, man and woman, have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. God is describing us. So God created man, how? In what? In his own image. In the image of God, it says again, lest we miss it. Created he him, male and female, created he them. So God got down in the dirt. This is fascinating to me as well. The king, the creator, royalty, the utmost of royalty, down in the dirt by the riverside. And begins not just with spoken word, but with his tender hands to sculpt the visage of himself onto this creation that is man and woman. Us, made in the image of God. How awesome that is. And so God breathed into man, and we'll talk a bit about that tomorrow. And man and woman became living souls. And God said, look, I'm giving you dominion over all of this. You are kings and queens here in the earth. It's your identity. I have made you in my image. Your identity. All I ask is that you not eat of this tree. And the tree was known as the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Saying another way, a tree after which you ate of it, you would know both good and evil. But at this point, this magnificent man and this magnificent woman, this king and queen over the earth, they only knew good, and they were made in the image of God. That's a lovely tale. It's nice. In fact, I wish I could sit down right here. But unfortunately. So Satan could only tempt the man and the woman from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And man and woman knew not to eat of the tree. They knew. And I don't know how long they were in the garden. I don't know how much time had passed. But we are to understand that one day Eve, passing by the tree by herself, and there was a serpent, a snake, which was a beautiful creature. The Word of God says it was very subtle. The snake was in the tree, and the snake opens up its snaky mouth and speaks to Eve. Now watch this. The snake says, are you not supposed to eat of this tree? And the woman says, no, we are not supposed to eat of this tree, because God says that in the day we eat of it, we will surely die. We don't want that. God has said, amen, I am done. And now watch what the serpent says. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. And then watch this. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as what, everybody? Gods, knowing good and evil. He said, you won't die, but God knows that when you eat, you'll know both good and evil, and you will be as gods. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, now let me pause here. Satan does this a lot. We understand the cosmic significance of sinning. We know the bigger picture. We know what we should and should not do very often, but Satan has a way of getting us to forget all of that. After everything that had just been said, after the, oh, you may die, you may be as gods, and all of this crazy stuff, Eve looks at the fruit and she says, man, that looks good. She saw that it was good for food. Satan throws this in there and then turns the sin into a simple act, an act that is dependent upon our more base passions, causing us to forget the greater issue here. But let me leave that. She looks and she sees that the tree is good for food and that it is pleasant to the eye. And here, look at this. And a tree to be desired to make one wise. And she took of the fruit thereof and did eat. Then she took it to her man, and he ate. She was beguiled. Why? Because Satan said, you so pretty. Girl, look at you. What's up, shorty? No. It was wisdom that he offered her. But I want you to appreciate the tragedy here. He said, in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes will be open and ye shall be as what, everybody? But she was already made in the image of God. Satan sold her something that she already had and caused her to forget her identity. Have mercy. Had Eve remembered who she was, she could have said, you know what, I'm already made in the image of God. And God be praised, and he will kick me whatever knowledge he feels I should have in his own time. But here is a woman made in the image of God who sinned so she could become like God. Forgetting our identity can cause us to mess up. And you know what? Jesus went through it too. Same thing. Satan tried to attack Jesus through his identity. Let's look at this text. This is from the 3rd chapter of Matthew. And Jesus, when Jesus was baptized, went up straightway out of the water. Now let me pause. Jesus was in the water, and he had just been baptized by John the Baptist. And immediately after this is where we are. He went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were opened unto him, and he, Jesus, saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting upon him. And lo, a voice from heaven saying, this is my what, everyone? This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. I'm going to go ahead and read the first verse from chapter 4. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. Now, Jesus came to earth under circumstances that humanity cannot fully understand. An angel appeared unto Mary and said, behold, you're going to bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. And Jesus said, how's that? And Mary said, how's that going to happen, seeing as I've never been with a man? This is the mystery. And Jesus, in this immaculate conception, he is there, here on earth. But I want you to appreciate, now this is just based on some of the things that I have read. I want you to appreciate what it must have been like in the community. For Mary did not go around and tell everybody the experience she had with the angel. She pondered these things where, Pastor? In her heart. Mary knew what was up. And then you know some of the story. Mary is with child and she's about to marry Joseph. And Joseph comes along and Mary says, I am with child. Never in the history of humankind has a statement like that been made and it didn't cause some trouble. And Joseph's like, oh, she's with child. So much so that when Joseph went to sleep, the angel had to come to Joseph and say, now, Joe, do not be afraid to take Mary to be thy wife. That child is of God. And so they have this little thing here going on, but I want you to imagine what it's like in the community. What it just might have been like among people who knew their business or suspected. And here is Jesus, growing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man, and these people around him whispering about his paternity. Think about it. Think about what it must have been like for Jesus at the age of 12 when he goes to the temple and for the first time the weight of who he is and what he will do for humanity falls upon him. He realizes at the tender age of 12 that he must grow up, live sinlessly, and die for all of humanity. And while he's there dealing with this, there's the community. Imagine what it must have been like for Jesus to remain true, to remain sinless as he prepared for his ministry. And then Jesus, beginning his ministry at the age of 30, is that right? He goes to begin his ministry, and one of the first things that Jesus does is go to get baptized. And Jesus goes to get baptized, and he does it as an example for us. He puts Jesus in the water, John the Baptist, and when he pulls Jesus out of the water, the heavens open up, and God himself says, "This is my son." After all the years, after all the difficulty, Jesus is about to begin his ministry. Can you imagine what that must have done for him to have the Father himself give his blessing and say to all, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." Jesus had his identity affirmed. And then he goes into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. So Jesus is in the wilderness, and he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights. Fasting is an interesting thing. It causes a certain clarity of mind and strength on one end, and then there is a certain weakness that takes place because you're not eating any food on the other end. And Jesus is in preparation for his ministry. He's here in the wilderness, and the devil is ready for the show. The devil is preparing his assault. This is his first real chance to come at the Son of God and completely obliterate the plan of redemption right here at the beginning. That was not me. And Jesus is there in the wilderness. And it says in verse 3, and when the tempter came to him. Who's the tempter? Satan comes to Jesus. Jesus, who just 40 days earlier had been on the mountaintop. Jesus, who just had God himself say, "This is my son, this is who you are, and I'm pleased." Satan comes along and he says, if thou be the Son of God, command these stones to be made bread. Many times we get caught up in the bread of it all. Jesus was hungry. Jesus was tempted. Yes, some of this is true. Jesus had the power to turn the stones to bread and feed himself. Yes, some of this is true. But Satan said, if. Satan said, I know God just spoke to you, but prove it by turning these stones to bread. He kicked Jesus where he thought it would hurt. Jesus is forced to decide whether or not to stand on the word of God or have to doubt God by proving who he is. Satan attacking our identity. And look what Jesus says. But he, Jesus, answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone. And this is funny, because Satan wrapped this identity assault up in an offering of bread, and Jesus wraps the rebuttal in the same offering. Man shall not live by bread alone. But then here's the kicker. But by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. In other words, Jesus says, you know what, Satan? God said it, and it's good enough for me. Satan tried a couple more times, and then Jesus sent him packing. But if you analyze each and every one of the temptations that Satan gave Jesus, you will find that it is an assault on his identity every time. Bow to me, I will give you who is God. And Satan knew how to get to Jesus. If it was me, and I'm diabetic, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later, Satan would have probably showed up with a great big bucket of ice cream. Eat this. All of us have our weaknesses, but Satan came after Christ's identity because Satan knew that if he could just get Jesus to doubt who he is, then he'd have him. Now we get to the nitty and the gritty. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. But God commanded his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Because Satan does this to us every single day. Indeed, as we who are in the ministry encounter people, and people talk about their struggle, and people talk about what they're dealing with, and people talk about the monkey that is on their back, it all seems to come to the same thing. I've tried, this sin is me. I am a bondsman. I am a bondswoman. That is who I am, and I don't know what to do about it, and that is a lie. Because the verse says that even while we were in our sins, Christ died for us. And that is who we are. Not bondsmen and bondswomen, but people who have been purchased by the precious blood of Jesus. But if Satan can get you to forget that, you'll never beat him. Focusing so much on the chains that bind us that we forget who we are, that we lose sight of our identity. Don't let the devil steal your identity. In fact, he can't. You got to agree to give it up. I love pachyderms. I don't know if you have ever heard this story before, but surely you have. And before I go into it, let me take a little commercial break and address us, me, and you if I can. Those of us who are really struggling, those of us who are sitting here right now saying, I need Jesus. I need something more. I need something greater. I am tired of life like this. I want to be forgiven. I want to live for Christ. The good news is, even now, Christ died for you. And the chains and the sins and the things that we are struggling with are not our identity. That's not who we are. We are the children of God. And all we have to do is accept that. And when you accept that, you go onto a different path. A path that is different than sitting and dealing with the chains. Forget the chains. Focus on Jesus. Forget all of that. Focus on who you are. And one day you will wake up and be chain free. And Satan knows this. They use elephants as workers in certain countries, and the elephant is the largest land animal. The largest animal in the world is the blue whale. The elephant has absolutely no natural predators. Now, I have seen footage of lions taking on small elephants. I've seen footage of lions taking on hurt elephants, but I ain't never seen no footage of a lion taking on a grown, healthy male or female elephant. Not going to happen. But they use these massive and majestic and turning out extremely intelligent creatures for work. Now, intelligent is very important because they are learning that when an elephant is a slave, it knows it's a slave. We like to think they're idiots. They have no idea. They just, oh, okay. Not so. Not at all. The elephant does have a fantastic memory. The elephant, it turns out, not just makes noises, but has a language that takes place in the subsonic range. That means they speak in tones so low we can't even hear it. Why? Because low tones, please excuse, the nerd is coming out, have a longer wavelength, and they are able to travel over distances. So elephants can talk to each other from 50 to 100 miles away. They got elephant telephone. And good reception. I can't even make a call in my kitchen. And how do you get this intelligent creature to work for you? And it is simple. You get an elephant when it is young. This elephant here is a baby. And you put a chain on it. Now the elephant, grown, can knock down a tree. They do it regularly. In fact, when you see a forest after a herd of elephants have come through, looks like a tornado went through. They see something up there, they just knock it down, they eat it. Part of the great circle of life. But when an elephant is a baby, it's a baby. So they put the chain on the elephant, see? And the baby elephant does not have the strength to break the chain. So it is stuck. And you've got a baby elephant. But you keep feeding that elephant, and it's going to grow. That right there is a healthy bull African elephant. And they can keep an elephant like this. Now, usually this is India, so it's Asian elephants, but I like these. They're really big. You can keep an elephant like this in captivity, and it'll never go anywhere. It will never leave. Why? Well, because it's got this little chain, attached to its leg. It's the same chain that they put on it when it was a baby. But the elephant grows up under the bondage until it learns that it cannot get away. and it becomes part of its identity. I am a helpless elephant. And one day, this magnificent creature who could do like this, I need to stop before I break something, who could just pick up his leg and pluck that chain like a toothpick, never does. Because it doesn't understand its identity. Because it doesn't know that it is the biggest and baddest animal on land. Because it doesn't know that it was meant to knock down trees. Because it doesn't know that it was meant to send lions running in fear. Because it thinks, this is who I am. The elephant with the chain. And that is what the devil does to us. He keeps us under bondage and keeps us focused on our chains until we begin to think that's who we are. We don't realize that we were originally made in the image of God. We don't realize that we were destined to soar among the stars. We don't realize that later when Jesus came and gave his blood for us, we can call ourselves redeemed. That we can call ourselves the sons and daughters of God. We don't realize that's who we are, because if we knew that's who we were, we wouldn't even think about those chains. We wouldn't consider ourselves bondsmen and bondswomen. However, yeah. I am a sinner. And that is my destiny. I will never be more than this. I've been fighting this chain all my life. And I know that's all there is. Oh, won't someone help me? This is who I am. Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called not losers, not failures, but the sons and daughters of God. I'm going to jump to verse 2. Beloved, now are we the sons of God. Yes, but my life is a mess. Now are we the sons and daughters of God. Yes, but I continue to go back and I can't seem to break this addiction. Yes, but now are we the sons and daughters of God. And it goes on to say that it may not appear yet what you're going to be. You may not be there yet. God is still working on you. But guess what? You embrace who you are and ignore who you ain't. And one day, when Jesus returns, you will look at him and see him and notice that you're just like him. Years ago, thank you, when I was first diagnosed with diabetes, type 1. This is the kind that usually shows up when you are a kid. I was 22. Now, you notice I got my gloves, and a lot of people ask, so I may as well, and my little cane, tell you I also have rheumatoid arthritis. Now, that just showed up. It happens. But when the diabetes hit, I was a student at Loma Linda. And I went from 100 to 0 in like a week and a half. a mini coma. I was talking to the sister today. There's my sister that has peripheral neuropathy, ear and ear. Sometimes the sugar will begin to affect your motor functions and you get other things. Everything went crashing down at once. And suddenly, I was looking at a mountain of medical bills. And I had to make a choice. Pay rent, buy insulin. My first night on the street, a police officer came by and he says, young man, what happened to you? I began to tell him my story, and you start explaining it because I was embarrassed. I was 3,000 miles away from home. And the cop said, there is no need to explain. So you see that guy over there? That's a lawyer. That guy right there is an actor. And that guy between them, he was a doctor. It can happen. While I was out there, I saw people drop dead in the street, heat exhaustion, whatever else. And the ambulance would come by and scrape these people up. And the sad thing about it is the siren was never on. It would show up quiet. It would leave quiet. And that was who we were. Expendable. One night, at the very bottom of it all, a Captain Hicks, and I keep his card in my wallet to this day. I may never see him again. I hope not. He came to me where I was sleeping in the parking lot of the mall. And he says, there's a homeless shelter on M Street. He says, if you go, they will give you a meal and a place to sleep. Well, that sounded all right to me. So I hoofed my way over to M Street. And I was met at the door by a gentleman who says, okay, here are the rules. No drugs, no drinking, no sex. I was like, I can work that out. And I went inside, and the moment I crossed the threshold, I saw masses of people with shattered dreams and a reality that they just could not believe. And I was one. We. Us. This is who we are. And as I was walking, because it was late at night when I arrived, to the room where the sleeping quarters are, I muttered to myself, I cannot believe this is happening to me. And the guy, he had my blanket and the little sheet folded under his arm. He looked at me and he said, believe it. This is who you are. I entered a room that was designed for about 20 men, and I'm going to say they had 150 people in there. The odor was something that I cannot describe and I cannot forget. And I was scared. So they said, you're going to sleep right here. Now let me advise you, when the lights come on, you need to get up. Do not dally in the cot. Do you understand? I understand. And he left, and I lay there with the sheet like this. And while I lay there and the lights went off, there was a man, and don't worry in this, I'm not going to tell them all the details, who got up and made his way out of his bed, and I saw that he had been mutilated physically in a horrible, horrible way. I didn't know if he'd been attacked. I didn't know what. Later on, when I got me a little medical education, I learned that it was Mycobacterium leprae, also known as leprosy, in America. I did not sleep that night, and the next morning when the lights came on, I was the first on my feet. And men began to mill around, and some were brave enough to shower, and some, like me, were like, I think I'm going to be funky today. And while we were milling around, the guy opened the door. And understand, as you hear this and you listen to this, this is the reality for many people right now. And there's some in here that can probably amen. Because you've been through it, or you're going through it. Brother Joel, I always respect what you do here. I told you I'd tell you why. This is why. And see if my other brother is here that I was talking to, who opened the restaurant and took care of the homeless. I don't see him. I see Joel. They said breakfast will be served in 10 minutes. If you want any, then you'll get down there. And I was hungry. So we made our way down to breakfast. And they sat us at these tables. We were all lined up, a very prison-like atmosphere. And I was sitting there. And because of who we were not privileged to the same respect that regular citizens get. So I'm there, and the guy came by, and I had a bowl, and he had the cereal, but instead of pouring it, he would, wipe his nose and reach in with his hand and put the cereal in the bowl. And this is my favorite. I usually have a little thing to show an example. He had a pitcher of milk, and his hand was down in the milk like this. And when he poured the milk would run over his fingers into the bowl. I know, Elder Harrison, you're like, no way, I would die. The question is, how hungry are you? While I was there, I saw things that I don't want to talk about. When I got out of the situation and I first hit medical school, I had to go to therapy for 2 years. But on this specific morning, after we'd had our breakfast and after some of us had had our showers, it was time to get out. Because you didn't stay in the shelter to recreate. You're there to eat and sleep. Now you go out in the street and do whatever it is you're going to do. And I, with my head down, that's how we walk. And I walked to the doors. In one of these moments here, Pastor, when I knew I was going to be a preacher. We walked to the doors, and I stood there in the threshold, and I looked up, and somebody had written the words over the door, "Through these doors march the sons of God." Through these doors march the sons of God. And I remembered Sabbath school, and I remembered all those times in church and Pathfinders and my upbringing and all of these things, and I recalled that this situation was not my identity. It was just a symptom of my circumstance, but it's not who I am. No, no, no. I am, I said to myself, a child of God. And I knew that one day I'd be able to look somebody in the eye and spread that good news. The good news that says no matter what you're going through, no matter how sinful you are, and yes, you need to clean yourself up, and yes, you need to dust yourself off, and yes, you need to do a whole lot better, but regardless, your addiction, your affliction, your problem is not your identity. It is just a symptom of your condition. You can walk into any hospital in America and you go down the intensive care unit and you got people in there that have all kinds of sicknesses. Oh, help me, Lord. And when you look at the chart, nobody is called Mr. Cancer, and nobody is called Mrs. Diabetes. That is not who they are. That is a symptom of their condition. They have an identity. And don't you let Satan allow you to forget who you are. Because when you remember that you are a child of the Almighty, and when you remember that even while you were a sinner and even while you were no good, Christ came down and stretched himself out and died just for you, the chains will come off. Now, we're going to talk about a lot of things this week. But right here at the beginning, I want us to realize who we are, our destiny, where it is that God intends for us to be. If you are looking at your state right now and you are wanting something more than good, that's God reminding you of who you are and where he wants you to be. And we, through Jesus Christ, can have it. We are destined for heaven. We are. All we have to do is acknowledge our identity and reach out, like we said this morning, and Jesus will do the rest. And the chains that you thought were part of who you are will fall off, and you'll be free. I'm going to make an appeal. Nothing big, nothing fancy. If you want to embrace your identity, if you want to acknowledge who you are, shake off the chains, shake off the devil, and walk with Jesus. Why don't you stand with me? God is a very individual God. And though we stand as a group, he sees us as individuals. And he sees each and every one of us. And he sees the commitment that we make. And he's willing to do for us. Let us be willing to come to him. Shall we pray? Oh, our Father in heaven, when we deserved so much worse, infinitely worse, you came and you made us kings and queens. Oh, our Father in heaven, even while we were in our sins, even while we had no hope, you came and died for us. Oh, our Father in heaven, even while the devil is trying to make us think that hell is our destiny, you have called us your children and said heaven is our home. You even went so far as to prepare mansions for us before we even got there. And for these things we say thank you. And now you see us all standing, Lord, making a commitment to come to you and to embrace the identity that you have made available. Oh, see us, Lord, and bless us, Lord, and strengthen us, Lord, to walk this path. These things we ask in thy holy and powerful name.